Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Goodness. After 9/11, it has been reported as the world's attention-grabbing incident. It is the assassination attempt of the former president and the current presidential candidate, Donald Trump. Will the assassination of the political lead change the space of politics? Before we look at that, let's have a look at what's heating up in United States. Americans will go to the polls to elect their next president in November 2024. The contest will feel familiar as the two main candidates are the same as in 2020. Joe Biden, the incumbent, faced no viable competition for the Democratic nomination, though a disastrous debate performance in June has made some Democrats question his fitness for the job, putting his candidacy in doubt. His predecessor in office, Donald Trump, easily showed off a crowded field in the Republican primary. Who is the most favorite of the two from the view of the public? Both men are widely disliked. Joe Biden, oldest ever major party presidential candidate. Biden won a seat in the Senate at the age of 30 and held it over 3 decades. He made failed bids for a president in 1988 and 2008 and served as Barack Obama's vice president. Despite a reputation as a centrist Democrat, he has pushed to expand the state and lobbied for unions. He has also led an international coalition to support Ukraine against Russia's invasion. Biden's presidency has been defined by high inflation, big industrial policy bills, and the turmoil abroad. And worries about his age continue to plague his campaign. Whereas Donald Trump's extraordinary campaign, followed by his no less remarkable term as America's 45th president, which concluded shortly after his supporters staged an armed attack on the Capitol. His alleged role in instigating the attack and a broader effort to overturn the results of the 2020 election resulted in 2 criminal indictments in federal court and in Georgia's state court. He faces 2 other totally 91 felony charges. That 70-year-old denies all wrongdoing. This time, his campaign pairs familiar culture war issues, building a border wall, left-wing gender insanity, with fresh grievances against the lawyers prosecuting his cases and the judges overseeing them, where Biden promises to finish the job if re-elected. But many voters think the job may finish him. The election will be a less popularity contest than a referendum on which candidate Americans think is the least bad option. In the past, Russian President Vladimir Putin had a huge interest and interference with the US election. Will that be felt this time around? Federal, state, and local officials at present charged with protecting voting integrity faced with a diverse and complex threat landscape to US. US Director for National Intelligence mentioned recently this. Russia remains the most active foreign threat to our elections, using a vast multimedia influence apparatus, encompassing state media, intelligence services, and online trolls. Russia's goals include eroding trust in US democratic institutions, exacerbating socio-political division in the United States, and degrading Western support to Ukraine. But it's a crowded field, with China, Iran, and other foreign actors also trying to sway American voters. Here comes another thread which wasn't so much present in the past. The rise of new AI technologies that can create realistic, deep fakes targeting candidates and of commercial firms through which foreign actors can launder their activities are enabling more sophisticated influence operation at a larger scale that are harder to attribute. And now the realization of a threat with a narrow miss, Trump's assassination attempt. Post the assassination attempt, Trump mentioned this. The most incredible thing was that I happened to not only turn my head, but to turn at the exact right time and in just the right amount, when the bullet that glazed his ear could have easily killed him. What does President Biden has to say on this? We cannot, must not go down this road again. We have traveled it before in our history. So what is he alluding to? About 60 years ago, mortal shooting of John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, as he rode in a motor car in Dallas. Accused killer was a former US Marine who had embraced Marxism and defeated for a time in the Soviet Union. Biden further says, in America, we resolve our differences at the ballot box. At the ballot box, not with bullets. Is it so, Mr. Biden?
පොඩ්කාස්ට් මාස්ටර් ක්ලාස් by බෘුණ දිවාකර දැන් අපේ SLVLOG.lk සයිට් එකේ තියෙනවා. ඔයාලට ඇවිල්ලා පර්චේස් කරලා මේ කෝස් එක බලන්න පුළුවන්.
So, what is deemed as political assassination? An action that directly or indirectly leads to the death of an intentionally targeted individual who's active in the political sphere in order to promote or prevent specific policies, values, practices, or norms pertaining to the collective, says a study. Political assassination have been part of the social reality since the emergence of communal social frameworks as the leaders of tribes, villages, and the other type of communities constantly needed to defend their privileged status. Political assassinations are more probable in countries that suffer from a combination of restrictions on political competitions and strong polarization and fragmentation. States that lack consensual political ethos and homogeneous populations include politically deprived groups will face a decline in the legitimacy of the political leadership, the political system, and an increase in the likelihood of direct attacks against political leaders. In the ancient world, assassination featured predominantly in the rise and fall of some of the greatest empires. Familiar with military victories of Alexander the Great, his ascendance to power is facilitated by the assassination of his father, who was struck down by a bodyguard. Gaius Julius Caesar was assassinated by Roman senators who increasingly feared that Caesar would revoke their privileges. In the modern times, political assassination continued to play an important role in political and social processes and in some cases have a dramatic effect. The number of such attacks has risen dramatically since the early 1970s. This is reflective of the emergence of a new wave of terrorist groups, radical and universal ideologies operating on a global scale. A growing willingness by oppressive regimes to use assassinations as a tool in their treatment of political opposition. While most assassinations of government officials were perpetrated by sub-state violent groups, most assassination of opposition leaders were initiated by the ruling political elites or their proxies. This important observation supports the notion that growing number of terrorist groups see assassinations as a legitimate and an effective tool, and that one of the major obstacles for democratization is the vulnerability of the political opposition. Many argue that the assassination of the then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 was a major reason for the collapse of the peace process between Israel and Palestine. Difficult to deny the impact of the assassination of figures such as Martin Luther King or Benazir Bhutto on the success of their political movements and parties following their death. Americans still cite the assassination of John F. Kennedy as the crime that has had the greatest impact on the American society in the last 100 years. A notable assassination attempt in Sri Lanka led to severe changes in politics. The fifth president of Sri Lanka, Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, targeted upon leaving her final election rally at Town Hall in the country's capital of Colombo. She was caught in an explosive attack. Kumaratunga survived but was injured permanently, losing vision in her right eye. In the days following the attack, Kumaratunga won the election, defeating the current president Ranil Wickremesinghe. In some regions, however, the political assassinations have become dominant only in the last couple of decades. In South Asia, for example, 76% of the assassinations have been perpetrated since the mid-1980s, possibly a consequences of the growing instability in the region during and after the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan. And more than 85% of the assassinations in the Eastern Europe were perpetrated after 1995, with the start of the transition to democracy in most Eastern European countries. A process that in many cases was accompanied by growing ethnic tensions and political instability. When looking specifically at the facilitators of assassination of head of state, we can identify some unique trends. To begin with, the politics more susceptible to assassinations against the head of state are authoritarian politics that lack clear succession rules, as in which the leader enjoys significant political power. This is true even more so in politics that also include oppressed minorities and high levels of political polarization. Therefore, non-democratic political environments that feature leaders who are able to garner significant power and in which the state lacks efficient mechanism for leadership change following an assassination provide more prospects for success in advancing political changes via political assassination. This stands in contrast to democratic system in which it is clear that the elimination of a head of state will have only a limited long-term impact on the socio-political order. Understanding of the causes and the implications of political assassination is still an under-investigated area. So can the governments do something about it? The governments can promote political and social conditions that may decrease the prospects of political assassinations. For example, while governments in polarized societies and sometimes have the tendency to restrict political participation in order to prevent further escalation in interstate communal relations, this action will actually increase the probability of political assassinations. In order for electoral process to become a viable tool for promoting a productive and peaceful political environment, it is clear that they are more effective after ensuring the most intense political grievances has been addressed. And shaping the stable and regulated succession mechanism is also highly important, especially in countries that are struggling to construct stable democratic institutions. More attention needs to be given to the safety of the political leaders during the instances of violent democratic clashes or transitions to democracy. Opposition leaders are most vulnerable in the early stages of democratization. So the effort to facilitate a democratic environment must also include the creations of mechanisms to ensure the safety of opposition leaders. This in turn will enhance the legitimacy of political participation, reduce polarization, and enhance political stability. This in turn will enhance the legitimacy of the political participation, reduce polarization, and enhance political stability. More than half of the assassins have been involved in criminal activities prior to the assassination. This may indicate that a group usually prefers one of the veteran members to perform an assassination, probably because of the high stakes involved in these kinds of operation and relatively high level of operational knowledge necessary to conduct them. Here, this is something for the lawmakers. More than half of the assassins had been involved in criminal activities prior to the assassination. This may indicate that a group usually prefers one of its veteran members to perform an assassination, probably because of the high stakes involved in these kinds of operation and relatively the high level of operational knowledge necessary to conduct them. So, here is the big fat question. Have the assassination or the attempted assassination helped to resolve the boiling issues of the nation or the society? A big no is what we are able to see. Instead, it has kept the system running to benefit a few for decades and more than for centuries. While the big fishes play in a larger pond of politics, an average citizen faces the challenges and struggles of the day-to-day. With that, I will leave you today. Until then, you look after yourself. I will meet you in another episode of Goodness. Thank you.
Modabhimanaya ආණ්ඩුවේ මේ මට